I think we are live, so we're going to get started. I am Amber Hines. I am one of the organizers of WordPress Accessibility Day. I'm super excited to be live today with two of our sponsors and speakers at WordPress Accessibility Day. Morgan is from Gravity Forms and Rianne is from Level Level and the Alley Collective. And we're going to be talking a little bit about specifically on Gravity Forms, and then we'll tease their talk a little bit, which should be really fun. We do have open captions today just because some of the social media platforms don't have captions. If you prefer closed captions, we will correct them and have a video available after the fact with closed captions. So to start us off, Morgan, do you want to introduce yourself and tell anyone who's never heard of Gravity Forms a little bit about what Gravity Forms is?
Sure. Yeah, so I'm Morgan Kay. I am a software engineer at Rocket Genius, which is the company that makes Gravity Forms. And if you don't know Gravity Forms, it is a form building plugin for WordPress. But it does a whole lot more than just build forms. Basically anything you can imagine doing with a form, e-commerce, polls, quizzes, connecting to all sorts of CRMs, integrating with all sorts of different services. Gravity Forms can do all of those things.
Great. And Rianne, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Rianne Rietveld. I'm from the Netherlands, so I have an accent. I work for Level Level, that's a WordPress agency, and I also work for the Alley Collective, that's an online learning platform for accessibility. Yeah. And Morgan asked me to join her because we're going to talk about Gravity Forms, and I did some consultancy for them.
You helped Gravity Forms with some of their accessibility initiatives. Yep. That's awesome. So Morgan, I don't know if I know you're more on the software development side at Gravity Forms, so I don't know if you know sort of the background on what made Gravity Forms interested in sponsoring WordPress Accessibility Day.
We're really concerned about accessibility. Accessibility is very important to us as a company, and we think it should be a big part of all websites. So it's just part of our values.
Yeah. And so as Rianne mentioned, and as you were saying, as part of your values, and I know we use Gravity Forms, actually the WordPress Accessibility Day website, all of our forms, they're all Gravity Forms. And so I've been kind of following along as you all have gone through this journey to put significant effort into making the plugin more accessible. And so I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about what inspired that effort and what that journey looked like.
That effort actually started before I joined the company about 2.5 years ago. So I wasn't around for the decision-making process. But I do know that Gravity Forms, everyone who works at the company is very kind and caring. And one of our company values is empathy for our customers and caring for all of our customers. So I know that was a big part of the thought process behind it. Kind of the first step was bringing Rianne on board as a consultant to teach us all about accessibility and to do an accessibility audit of Gravity Forms. Rianne, do you know any more about that decision-making process?
Well, I think it's the empathy, but also it's required more and more for government sites and public service side to apply to WCAG or Section 508. And Gravity Forms wanted to join that effort, and also that Gravity Forms could be used on websites for government or for websites that need to apply for accessibility standards. So that's also been one of the part of the decision making, just being up to date and modern and to standards.
Yeah, I mean, it really does expand your customer base and where your software tools can be used if you can meet those standards.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit, Rand, about that auditing process and what that looks like? Like if another, and I know I'm throwing you a question on the fly that wasn't on our question list, but if another plugin is interested in going down this path and being audited or trying to fix their problems, what does that look like from a plugin perspective? I know we talk about testing websites a lot. Is it different for a plugin?
Yeah, because a plugin can be used in many different ways. Gravity Forms, people can use it in many different ways with many different settings also, and it's implemented in a theme, and people can just adjust that also. So you have much more variables into that, and it makes it harder because other people are really controlling the plugin. So you have to take into account many cases the plugin is used. What I did first was just a review of every field and just an install with everything, and then test every field, also the error messages, how people get information, like if they have a wrong field entered, or if they have combination of fields, conditioning fields, or like the submit button hidden, all kinds of scenarios we tested. And I wrote a report about that and handed it over to Gravity Forms and said, well, this is what you need to do.
Yeah, and so then they got to go through the process of fixing things, and I imagine that you came back and retested after they made some of their fixes.
And I also met the team, and I did kind of awareness session and asked any questions they had. So that was also very useful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So on that note, do either of you have tips for plugin developers if they are interested in making their own plugins accessible? Maybe even if it's a free plugin and they don't have a huge budget to bring a consultant, is there a good place to start, or some place where they could learn more beyond, of course, WordPress Accessibility Day, which we want everyone to attend next week?
Morgan?
Honestly, my first advice is just try it, use it with keyboard navigation and voice, a screen reader. You'll find a lot of problems really quickly that way, and quickly gain a lot of sympathy for your users once you try to use those tools on your own. If you aren't used to using them, you'll realize how painful it can be. Rian is the better person to answer the question about what resources are out there. There are a lot of good resources. Yeah, there are a lot. Yeah. Testing your plugin with keyboard only. If you Google that, you get a lot of WebAIM has an excellent page about that, on how it's really not rocket science. It's easy to learn, and then you understand how people struggle to go through a website. You can follow courses on the L Collective, because we explain how to test and how to what's needed for accessibility. On the W3C website, there's a lot of information also about WCAG and about how to test. There's a website called Ellie and then project.com. And there's a ton of information about accessibility and how to test and where to start. So there's a lot out there.
Yeah, those are all really great resources. I know I've used some of those myself as well. So one of the things that I have really admired about Gravity Forms, and I think is worth highlighting or discussing a little bit more, is that not only did they do work on the front end of the plugin, but there have been notices that have been added into the editor for users to provide guidance in the dashboard to help them make more accessible choices as they're building their forms. So I was curious if you either of you had thoughts about that, like why it's important to add those, and in addition to what was done to improve the front end accessibility of the forms.
We say that you can make accessible forms with Gravity Forms. You can also make inaccessible forms with Gravity Forms. So we needed to make sure that someone who chose Gravity Forms because they knew it could make accessible forms was also aware that they could make decisions that would make their forms inaccessible, and putting those notices in the editor. So for example, we have a multi-select field. The multi-select field is just not accessible, and there's no way to make it accessible. So if you pick that field, there's a little notice saying this field has accessibility problems, you shouldn't use it. we just wanted to provide guidance to users without expecting all of our users to become accessibility experts, so that they could make good decisions and keep their forms accessible.
Mhm. Yeah, because there's so much that just comes when the content creator is building out things on the site.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing there's maybe some things in the plugin that you can't remove because of backwards compatibility issues.
Yes.
Is that kind of like that field, for example?
Yeah, we had big discussions about that. Yeah, because backwards compatibility is also one of our major commitments. We want to make sure that an update never breaks your website or your forms. So there were some things that we talked about just removing, but we couldn't for backwards compatibility reasons. So that's part of why some of those notices are in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is always a challenge when you're a plugin developer and
Yeah.
you have a huge user base like Gravity Forms does. It's easier if you're like, well, we only had 100 users. Oh, well.
Yeah.
But when you have tens of
And
thousands.
I think that the most discussions were about that, how to maintain backward compatibility, but also get it accessible as it is now.
Yeah.
That was a lot of work, a lot of thinking.
Yeah. I mean, I think in some world, that's kind of why ARIA exists, right? Like why I've seen instances where they add roll of button to something because they're worried about breaking if they change it to a proper tag. Of course, you have to use that carefully, but yeah. So I'm curious from both of you, if there was one or two things that you would like to see improved in WordPress itself, WordPress core from an accessibility perspective, what would that be?
I mean, honestly, it's been a long time since I've played with Gutenberg without a mouse. So I'm not sure how accessible it is these days, but I know that Gutenberg has had challenges all along. It's a very complicated user interface and super important that it remains accessible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you have anything, Rianne?
Well, I was playing around with full site editing experience, and as a non-disabled person, I struggle. So I wonder if someone cannot see or is only able to use the mouse of the keyboard, they struggle even more. I think it's not intuitive. But maybe if you work a lot with it, it gets more easy. But at the moment, I just think it's undoable to actually, for example, add a menu or stuff like that. It's really hard because I don't get the interface.
Yeah, I haven't tried full site editing much. I've been kind of hiding from it, but I've been hearing this from people that they're saying, I've worked in WordPress for many years and I couldn't figure out how to create a new navigation menu in full site editing.
And you're forced into that full site editing mode and you struggle how to get out of it. And then adding a menu, it was really nice what it was, and it was fully accessible. And now it's like, I cannot figure out how it works. So that's maybe something that needs work.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I've heard a lot of that, and I could definitely agree with you. I've seen the same thing even with when the full screen mode on the post or page edit screen became default, and clients would go to edit a post and then they're like, I don't know how to get back or how to close it.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh, you just need to go in the setting and make this not your default every time so that you can see the menu on the left and you know where to get where you need to go.
Well,
but it is like interesting things that we don't realize can trip people up, you know, and I think that's probably why user testing and getting a lot of feedback is really important. So you two are giving a talk. It is, I'm trying to figure out if I still have my schedule up. There we go. It is on November 2nd at 1800 UTC. Can you two tease the talk a little bit for us? Why should people tune in? What can they expect to hear about?
Well, obviously we're going to talk about forms, but we're not just going to talk about how to write standard compliant code in your forms. we're also going to talk about form design, form usability, the kind of big picture thinking about how to build forms so that all of your users can fill out your forms with no stress.
Great.
Yeah, it's not only about Gravity Forms, it's about forms in general, but we also show how you can set up a form in Gravity Forms fully accessible. So it's a bit of both, and it's a takeaway for all people who use forms or want to build forms.
Sounds great. I know I'm definitely looking forward to that talk. So my last question, just if anyone wants to get a hold of either of you, find you on the webs, or if someone wants to learn more about Gravity Forms, where should they go?
Gravityforms.com. And I guess the best way to get in touch with me would be morgan@rocketgenius.com.
Okay. And Rianne, if anyone wanted to follow up with you?
Yeah, my company website is level-level.com. And you can find me on Twitter at Rianne Rietveld. That's my handle, just my name.
Yep. Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you two spending time with me chatting today. We'll have the recap posted up on a blog post on the WordPress Accessibility Day website soon. For anyone who's watching, go register. It is free. It starts next Wednesday on at 10 a.m. Central. I'm in Central Time, so I'm not thinking the correct time for the world, which is not great. At 14:45 UTC, we're going to have opening remarks, and our keynote speaker, Nicholas Steenhout, will be kicking things off at 1500 UTC. So thank you both for joining me, and we hope we'll see everyone there, and everyone will tune in for your talk.
Thank you.
All right.